Alright, today we want to talk about how to export your tracks, and I'm going to do this in two different parts. First will be in the mixing project, so you want to split your process into mixing and mastering, and in the second part we then talk about the mastering process. So in the mix process, all it comes down to is basically you want to export your file with enough space at the start and at the end, and also in a very high definition. So the most you can get out of your DAW would be the export file you want to get from your mix in order to get the highest quality available. And in the mastering process, you then want to shrink this down into file formats that are easier to handle. So on the one hand, you might want to have a high quality file, but on the other hand, you might also want to have a file that you can easily send over the network, for example, to your friends or whatnot. And we'll talk about the first part first. So if you have your project opened, I've loaded up one of my latest ones. You can also listen to this on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms. The first thing you want to do is mark everything and then hit P, so that you can basically get your loops, your loop points, and everything in the project is available. So then the second thing you want to make sure is that you have some space at the end of the song and probably also at the start of the song, so that things like reverb or delay can easily translate or like fade out after the song has finished, and we'll get to this portion in the mastering process then, where we can basically fade all of this in and out as we wish. And then you have like your region, and then you should be able to export this. I'm not going to do this for the whole project here, but I'm going to use one small portion. In this case, I chose the bars 5 to 9. So in this case, I set my loop points here. We can just take a quick listen back. This is what it sounds like. Alright, and this is what I want to export now. We are in the mixing phase now, and we are going to look into the mastering phase after that. So I'm going to File, Export, and then I'm going to go Audio Mix Down. I'm going to bring this over here. And then the first thing, or no, not the first, the only thing we want to do in this mix session is basically export this in the highest quality that we have available. You can also set a preset for that. In this case, this would be Wave 192 kilohertz, 64-bit float. And the problem with these formats is that some of those, especially if you talk about the 192 kilohertz 32-bit float version, can be read and played back by some of your hardware and software systems. But on the other hand, stuff like this, especially 192 kilohertz 64-bit float, can not be played back by such systems. However, Cubase can handle this, so don't worry about that. You can easily load this back into Cubase and do some adjustments there, and then also transfer the rate back to that. In this case, we have a project that is also a 192 kilohertz 64-bit float in the recording format, but it does not really matter if you have like 96 kilohertz, because this upsampling process will only add more information to that and not reduce anything. So upsampling is possible all the time. Downsampling is a little bit awkward sometimes. So enough said, 64-bit float, and 192 kilohertz. I'm going to hit Add to the queue, and then I'm going to start queue export. And what this means is basically I'm going to export from my locators. You can also do cycle markers when you want to export like complete albums, for example. You can set up your cycle markers and let this export everything. And in this case, we get the lo-fi WAV in our project mixdown folder. So if we look into this folder, this is the folder here. We have a mixdown folder in our lo-fi project here, and this is what we came up with. So like this is what I've exported right now. And this is the thing that you then, if this is your complete mix, you want to import in another session into Cubase, right? And when you do this, let me just quickly open the other project I've prepared here. So this is basically the mastering project then. And this might take a while. That's why I'm preparing this. And when you do this and import everything, you should be able to use this audio file then in your other session. The important thing about audio though is that it is much easier to handle these audio files because it is rendered already, so the processing is not that heavy on this stuff. So what I've done now is, again, we have our loop here, right? And we have our fade in and fade out stuff. You can also do this via automation, but in this case I did so in the audio itself. To handle one of these fade ins and fade outs, you just move this little triangle here and drag it wherever you want the fade in or fade out to happen. In this case, let's keep it this way. And also you want to hit P again to get your whole project in the locator range, right? Remember that we had an export that was probably longer, so you can chop this off and then do the fade out. And this is what is all done in the mastering process to get everything nice and tidy. And then we want to export this again. So what we do is File, Export, then again an audio mixdown, but in this case we have the mastered version. Just before I'm doing that, if you notice, we probably had a quieter loudness back in the mixing process, and I forgot to mention that. If you want to master, please leave some sort of headroom, so like 6 to 10 decibels. It is much easier to bump everything up to the desired loudness, but if you are on 0 dB already, there is not much that you can do in order to get the real sound back. So mix quieter and keep it this way. So you can of course apply a limiter if you just want to have a quick export, but if you're doing the mastering, please put everything down. Maybe also just use your faders for that, and then use the quiet version for the mastering, and then in the mastering process you put everything up to level, or you let your mastering engineer of choice, of trust, do this for you. So now File, Export, Audio Mixdown, and now what we want to do is basically, at least what I always do, is I'm exporting 3 different versions. I always export a MP3 file for easy handling, right? Sending this to someone. You have to be careful though with these MP3 files, because they get somewhat annoying in the high end if you have very much going on there. But usually if you have a high quality MP3 file, this should be fine. So in this case, I set a preset for this 320 MP3, which is basically 320 kilobits per second. MP3 is this one here, and then high quality mode, so everything is the highest quality you can get. I mean, MP3 files aren't that large anyway, so it should be fine to have a like 12 megabyte file. I mean, it's storage is very cheap nowadays, so this should be no problem. Add to queue. Remember, I've set a name for this here, and then we want to have 2 different versions. One high quality version in 96 kilohertz, 24 bits, non-float, which is this one. I'm going to give this another name, namely just wave. Add to queue, and then we want to have another version, which is the very high quality version. I've talked about this earlier, and we call this wave, for example, with very high quality, and we add this to the queue as well. So we have 3 files, start queue export, and then we get all 3 files done in a no, I forgot to set my locators the right way. So this could take some time. I don't want to make this video too long, so let me just do this again. The nice thing is everything is saved. So we are starting the queue export again, and then you see that everything's done in parallel, and we get our exported files. And if we look into our project folder again, this is the mixdown folder for the mix, and then we have the master folder here. This is a new project with another mixdown folder here, and then you have these 3 files that we've just created. These 3 files were created in the German version of this video, and these are the ones that we've created now, right? So you can basically delete everything else, and this is basically your export that you can use for uploading this anywhere, or sharing with your friends, or sharing with anyone you feel comfortable with. And this is what comes out of Cubase as the master that has been mastered, that has been finished.